Hello and welcome to the National Cannabis Prevention and Information Centre's first clinically focused webinar. My name is Dion and I'm a research officer here in the clinical training team, and I'll be introducing you to Etty, today's presenter. I'll also be moderating the question time at the end of the presentation, so please type through any questions in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. This webinar series is designed to introduce viewers to the Adolescent Cannabis Checkup, or ACCU, which is a brief intervention consisting of an assessment and a feedback session. This is the final webinar in this series. Last week we introduced viewers to the intervention and its background, as well as the first session, the assessment session. And then on Monday we introduced viewers to the second session, the feedback session, which is what we will be talking about today. As many of you are aware, Etty Matalon is delivering this webinar series. Etty is the clinical training manager here at NCPIC and has over 26 years of clinical experience working as a psychologist in the alcohol and other drug field. And she's been disseminating clinical workshops such as the ACCU for NCPIC since we started in 2007. Before handing over to Etty, I just wanted to let everyone know that this webinar series and the educational webinar series that we ran earlier in October and November this year will be posted on our website soon, hopefully by January at the latest. And I'll send everyone an email when that's up. Etty, welcome back.
Hi, and hello everyone, and thank you for ringing in or logging in or whatever happens at the other end. So welcome back to our final and last feedback session. Now, here's my friend Eric. Well, he's not really my friend, kind of, client slash case study slash whatever. So, hi Eric, and as we know, 23-year-old carpenter, still living at home, smokes about 8 cones a day, and presented because he was picked up roadside testing, DUI, very unlucky, got taken to the police station, and as you know, tested positive for cannabis. And so what we did then is we invited him to come back for the assessment, and we did the assessment with him, as you can see there. We may or may not have given him What's the Deal book to give him some information at the end of that assessment session, entirely up to you and your clinical feel for what he's, what he needs and what he's prepared to read and so on. So then we invited him back again for the personal feedback session, and decided that even if he didn't turn up for that feedback session, that it was definitely not a waste of 60 minutes or 90 minutes having gone through that assessment, looking at the various aspects of his life where cannabis may have been affecting it. And they were, under the headings of psychological, social and or physical. Now, for the feedback session, you'll need the feedback report, you'll need the feedback form, and perhaps the strategies workbook. But certainly, from the assessment to the feedback, you need to fill out the report and the form together. And then when he comes back, you'll say, this is my copy, we'll go through it, and this is your copy you can take away with you. So when we did that on Monday, we went through the reasons for attending, any motivation for change, what that was, looked at the good things about cannabis use, looked at patterns, history, fed back how much money it was costing him and so on, and looked at the not so good things. And then we got up to the anticipated consequences of reducing and or increasing use. Now, as you can see there, it does explore their expectancies in terms of reducing or increasing their cannabis use. And you use hypothetical things, well, hypothetical in the future. What would the future look like if you were to increase or decrease your cannabis use? And allows them to compare, the costs and benefits in terms of changing their cannabis use. And as we concluded, when we asked the question, what do you think might happen if you were to increase your cannabis use? Eric was quite, forward by saying, well, I'd be in major debt, I'd lose my girlfriend, I'd have to live at home forever, I'd get busted again, and so on. And then we flipped it around and looked at the positives. Are there any positives for you to increase your cannabis use? And he said something along the lines, well, it would give me something to do, or something something in that vein. So I hope that you do have... actually, Dion, did we send people the unfilled version of the feedback report?
I'm not quite sure, but I can do that.
Right, we were meant to do that on Monday. So because the website's not up and running perfectly, I would rather send the listeners the report so that you've got it there for you in the event that you want to do that with some of your clients that you may have already started. I'd like you to get a fresh version, because I'm not sure whether we can download it off the website. Be that as it may, we will definitely send you a clean version by close of business today, won't we, Dion?
We will. I'm sending that right now.
Beautiful. Okay, so I did send you the filled out one, and that's the one we're using for this case. So let's go back to where we ended up on Monday, looking at the video of Eric talking about that particular question. Okay, so cue video number 7, I think it is.
Okay, Eric. The next section goes through what we were talking about last week in terms of increasing your cannabis use. So what might the costs and benefits be of increasing your use? And you mentioned to me that one of the costs of increasing your smoking was that there would be more drama and conflict with your girlfriend.
And my parents.
Oh, and your parents. Because you'd have less time to spend with them, and you'd still be arguing just as much as now, because, well, you'd be zoned out.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And you also said that one of the benefits would be that you'd be smoking for longer to fill in the boredom. And you saw smoking for 6 hours as opposed to 4 hours as a really positive thing, because you enjoy smoking and it's a hobby to you, and at the same time you saw it as destructive to your relationships.
Yeah, well, that's just because I really like smoking, but it is a double-edged sword. I mean, the more I smoke, the more trouble I am causing with my relationships, so it's not really a benefit.
You're right. So, unpacking this a little bit more, do you see any benefits from increasing your smoking from, say, 8 cones a day to like 12 or more cones a day?
I guess not really.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, as you're saying before, I mean, I'm spending $8,000 on weed, and I could be spending that on something else, like a car or a holiday, and so I'm just kind of throwing it down the drain.
Yeah, right. Let's just isolate the financial costs since you've brought this up. So at the moment, mulling up, you're spending $8,000 a year smoking 8 cones a day. Based on that, if you increased your use to 12 cones a day, that figure comes up to over $12,000 a year. What are your thoughts about that?
Far out, that's scary, right? I mean, I never really had $8,000, and that's something I could be spending instead on a car or a holiday, so I guess I just never really added it up. It's like a quarter of my full-time wage.
So a quarter of all the money you earn, you spend on one thing so that you can relieve boredom.
Yeah, I guess so. And it's just going down the drain, so it's pretty bad, isn't it?
So you're not happy about the money you spend. You see it as wasted. Now, money is a really important issue for you to look at and for you to consider when it comes time to make an informed decision about whether you want to increase your cannabis use moving into the future.
Well, I don't know anybody who'd be happy spending $8,000 a year, and I've got nothing to show for it.
Okay, so that's where we left off, and Dion is sending the feedback form, and I just want to reiterate there are 2 different forms, and there's the ACCU assessment form, and then there's the ACCU feedback form. And so they're the two different ones that you can download and have been sent a clean version so that you can use them. The other books are ones that you need to order and get sent to you, whereas the other two are ones that you can download off our website. Okay, so that's looking at the anticipated costs and benefits of increasing. Right, and so you might then go on to a further discussion. Look, I would love to hear your views on what we've been discussing so far, and you may get some really good insight into where Eric's headspace is and looking for awareness and perhaps even some change talk. So let's move through the page 4 of the feedback form. And now we're going to look at the next part, which is 6, looking at important goals. Now, goals and aspirations, and as you know, he wanted a car and so on. Now, the discussion of goals and aspirations can provide you with information on what's important to that person and how they see cannabis use interacting or interfering, I guess, with their ability to achieve those goals. So this can be helpful for kind of developing discrepancy in their own mind. On one hand, they want these things, and on the other hand, they realize that, you know, they may not be able to get these things. And it is a good opportunity to allow that person to elicit self-motivational statements, which you are listening out for. So look for some serious goals that are important to that person, you know, that may enhance their motivation to change. And as we know, with Eric, what he wanted was a car. He wanted to improve his relationship. He wanted an apartment, a two-bedder. You know, he didn't want to live at home anymore. He wanted some more money, and he wanted a holiday in Hawaii. If you look at your filled out form, you'll see that. And after we looked at those goals, we then asked him to score how confident he was in achieving those goals. And he scored 5 on each one of those in terms of his ability to achieve those things. And then when we asked, okay, so what are you actually doing about that right now? For example, you know, the first one, which is the car, you know, and we had a demonstration of that. That was that was last week during the assessment session. We looked at that, and so what are you actually doing about getting a car? 0, just talking to me about it, or 10, you were there yesterday kicking tires down. And so we went down the list. So what are you actually doing about your relationship and so on? And then we went to, all right, let's look at cannabis and how that kind of impacts on those particular goals. And you look at increase, and you look at increase for each one of those goals. So the question would be, okay, so if you were to increase your cannabis use, what's the likelihood of you getting that car? And he would say 0. You go, okay, what's the likelihood of you keeping your girlfriend and not having any more arguments with your mum and dad? 0. What about an apartment? I mean, you want to live on your own. So what's the likelihood of you getting that apartment? Oh, 0. All right, what about more money to do stuff? Oh, probably 0. And what about a holiday? What's the likelihood? 0. All right, well, let's look at the flip side. If you were to decrease, or even if stop, if that's what you wanted to do, but certainly at least decrease, tell me, what is the likelihood of you now achieving those goals? Let's look at a car. How likely would you be if you were to decrease your cannabis use? What score would you give yourself? And he scored himself quite highly there. He scored himself an 8 on each one of those, but your client may or may not. But you will find that there's definitely an increase between, I mean, they're not bereft of insight, and it's not logical to think that if you were to decrease, that there wouldn't be benefits in you being able to achieve those goals. So your clients are always going to be, well, not always, I hate the word always, but more than likely going to give themselves a greater score when you talk about decreasing use. So then you go, okay, so on one hand it's this, and on the other hand it was that. How do you account for that? Like, how do you account for the difference or differences in those scores? And what you're looking for change talk. You're looking for them, or you're trying to draw out reasons for change by asking that question. And hopefully you may, not always, but you're also listening out for change talk. You're listening for something like, well, I guess it's really obvious that, you know, if I was to stop or cut down, then I wouldn't be spending as much money, which means that I would have 50 or 100 or whatever left over, which means that I could put that towards my car. And, you know, I wouldn't be stoned as often, and my girlfriend and I wouldn't be fighting as much. And so that is why you look at that discrepancy. That is a perfect example of discrepancy. And that's what you do with that question. And it is a very powerful question to ask someone in the future. You know, what does it look like if you were to increase or decrease? So that is the personal goals and aspirations. Then the next question is about your relationship. You try to identify some important people in that person's life, whether they're support people, what they actually think about that person's use. And one of the important people in Eric's life was his brother. And he had an important relationship with his brother. So it is a useful way to identify key people in that person's life and find out whether or not they know that cannabis is being used and what they think of it. What that person expects that they might think of it. So it also offers the opportunity to find out what the young person thinks about other people's concerns. Are they valid or not? For example, Eric might say, well, you know, my brother thinks that it's interfering with my work. He's scared that I might lose my job. And you might say, well, what do you think about that? Now, why would he be concerned? Again, you're trying to elicit that other people can see some concerns and do they have any value. So it can be useful, again, for developing discrepancy. For example, my girlfriend doesn't like it. It disappoints her, and I don't like to do that. So on one hand, you're using cannabis to blah, blah, and on the other hand, you don't want to disappoint her because she means a lot to you and you feel by doing this, you might be letting her down or something to that effect. So again, we heard him say something close to that in earlier clips. We might perhaps look at that again if we've got some time. But in one of the earlier clips, when we looked at the costs and benefits of using, he highlighted the fact that, you know, his girlfriend doesn't like it. All right, so they're relationships. And then we get on to the nub, the real crux of, we kind of focus on the last session and this session that comes down to where do we go from here. Immediate goals. You look at the immediate goals that were filled out, which is 8.8 on page 4 of the feedback, and you asked Eric to rate along that continuum how he felt about those immediate goals. So you're reviewing what's already been covered, you're looking at where that person is at with their cannabis use right now, and try to identify what they're likely to do about it. So where is the client with their cannabis use? Where do we go from here? How important is it for you? Now, if they're unsure, offer to talk about the options that they might consider. For example, you might say, look, there are a few options that I can see. Would it be helpful? Would it be okay for us to talk about some of those things, for you to kind of consider whether they're appropriate for you or not? Yes, whatever the answer is. So, okay, so the options are basically no change. What are the consequences of that? Stopping use. What are the consequences of that and how that looks? Reducing use is another option. Or stopping for a while and then revisiting the issues. It doesn't have to be permanent. Do any of those options interest you, Eric? Like, you know, can we talk about any one of those? So if the person does not want to make change, I guess you need to explore the details of that decision. So if they don't want to, you need to kind of, push them and move on to, so how would you know in the future, that you may need to revisit your cannabis use? So that's what this question is all about. So you start with, so you scored 5 in terms of how important it was for you to continue your cannabis use. And here are, as you can see, some suggested questions to enhance insight, again, in the hope of eliciting some change talk. So you're really getting a person to explore what's going on and where they're at. So that's the importance question that you asked up there. How important is it for you to continue your current level of use? That was at the very last, at the end of the assessment, that was on the very last page. The other question that you asked on the very last page was about interest. How interested are you in reducing or stopping your cannabis use right now? And what you have are more suggestions as to where you go from there. So what would need to happen for it to become, for you to become more interested in making that change? But why are you interested or not interested in making that change? Again, a lot of discussion there for you to kind of hopefully, through your ability to ask those questions and get answers or fuller answers, move them along that continuum towards change. The other question was, how important is it for you generally, just generally in the future, hypothetically, how important is it for you? And again, you've got some questions that you can further explore looking at that. So what stops you from moving from a 3 to a 7, or for him actually, he was, I think, he wasn't quite sure. He was somewhere in between 5 and 7, so around a 6. So what stops you from moving from a 6 to a 7 or from a 6 to an 8? And see what answers you get there. And then the last one looks at confidence. So now, how confident are you in your ability to reduce or stop? And again, some more questions that you can propose to Eric or your clients that you can have a further discussion around. And there they are for you to explore with that client. So after you've done that, you've fed that back, you scored X. Why is it X and not Y, etc., etc., etc. And then you get to the crux of the matter. Cannabis is either seen as a problem or cannabis is not seen as a problem. So what now, Eric? Where do we go from here? If the person does want to make change, explore the details of that decision. If a person does not want to make change, don't push them. Just move them on to how would you know question, which we'll look at in a second. So let's look at the first one, which is, okay, let's look at the future, Eric. Now, where do we go from here? So what now? In the future, how would you know if you were smoking too much? That's in the event that someone says, look, I'm not interested, thank you very much, but really I have no intention of stopping the amount that I'm using. You go, okay, well, that I understand that and I respect that. That's fair enough. But let's say 12 months from now, 6 months from now, how would you know that you were smoking too much? Kind of like what needs to happen for you to kind of rethink how much you're smoking? That is not a guarantee that they will when that thing happens. However, you are planting a seed, and there is a good chance that when that thing happens, they will then maybe stop and think, oh, I always said I was going to, rethink my cannabis use if I got fired or if I got thrown out of the house or whatever. So it's a very, very important question to ask. So in the future, how would you know? For someone who says thanks but no thanks. So we're going to look at one example of how that conversation might go with Eric. And I mean, again, depending on the answers. This is just one example. So if we could have a look at video 8, please, that would be great. Thanks all.
Well, that's all I really wanted to feed back to you today. I really appreciate you doing this and being so honest with me. It really is entirely your choice as to what you want to do. So where do you want to go from here, Eric?
Oh, well, I mean, I know I've got to cut down in future, but it's such a big part of my life at the moment, so I don't know kind of how.
Okay. Yeah, I hear that it's a big part of regular life right now. But thinking about all the things we covered, you say you know you need to stop, and you can see that coming over the horizon. Yeah.
Well, I know it's causing problems, and you've helped me see some of the issues, a bit more of those, but I don't think I could live without it at the moment.
Well, it's been an old friend. And you can see that it's going to be really hard to say goodbye. I mean, it's a tough thing to contemplate. So into the future, if you were thinking about cutting down or quitting, how would you know you were smoking too much? I mean, how will you know when it's time to cut down or stop?
Well, I don't know. I guess if I had to start using my credit card, and if I went into debt.
Yeah. Okay. So being in debt will tell you loud and clear that you've crossed over that line and it's time to reconsider your cannabis use. So let's look at things holding you back from making this change right now.
I'm just, I don't know, it's just such a big part of my life at the moment. It just feels like it'd be pretty hard to stop.
You think you don't have the ability to stop, it'd just be too difficult.
Yeah.
Or you don't have the confidence to stop. It's hard right now to see the steps to take.
I just don't think I could do it. It's just kind of too big of a change.
So what do you think it would take for you to feel confident?
Maybe just some more time, because it's all come a bit fast, so I just need more time to kind of put it together. Yeah, I just need time to process it.
Okay. This is a big decision for you. Changing something you hadn't thought about doing till just now. And you need time to adjust to the idea.
Yeah, it is at the moment. It's just it's something new to think about. Yeah.
Well, you got lots of new information and feedback, and you really do need some time to process. And so that you can make a decision about your cannabis usage. What are the things that you would want to take into account if you were to make any changes?
Oh yeah, well, my relationships, my money, being able to pay rent, and for other things other than cigarettes and weed, I suppose those would be the main things.
Okay. And
all the things that come with money, like being able to buy a car and go on a holiday and things like that, and all the things that have been putting off.
So if you see you're having even more arguments or you're getting into debt on your credit card, but these are signals, alarm bells for you that it's time for you to start making changes. You don't want to hurt your relationships, and you've got some good ideas about what you could achieve if you had more money. You've got a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, definitely. I just need some more time to think.
Right, beautiful. Well, if you ever get a chance to look at that video again, you know, just look out for some amplified reflections, or, for example, when she says, okay, so, you know, you don't think you've got the ability to stop. You know, it would just be too difficult for you. Or she says, you don't have the confidence to stop. It's hard right now to see what steps to take. So again, if you can just pick out those reflections, that was an amplified reflections, and other things that that are said during that conversation, I think it's really helpful to kind of get your heads around MI, and then of course, you know, try to evoke something. She evokes something from him, planting a seed, and then of course she summarizes when she talks about, you know, so these are signals, they're alarm bells for you, and so on. So all I'm suggesting is that if you get a chance to see those videos again, I think they're kind of really good displays or examples of MI. So this, you know, where do we go from here? How would you know that you were smoking too much? Definitely you need to make sure that you have clearly restated and validated their position. It's not that you're judging them for wanting to continue their cannabis use. So if no, for the future, ask the client, you know, as we said, how will you know you're smoking too much? And, you know, explain how important it is to identify how they could clearly know that the use was becoming unacceptable or harmful or excessive, and you really do need to push for details. So how often is too often, or how much money is too much money, or, you know, how many jobs do you need to lose, or is it just this job that you want to lose, and so on. So, and then you put all those specific examples together, and then you feed that back to them. So you might offer some harm minimisation suggestions after you've had that discussion. You go, okay, look, I respect your decision. I just want to make sure that your tolerance doesn't increase and that you're not going to be doing more harm to your lungs because you were telling me, you know, about this cough, etc., etc. Look, how about we just talk about some ways in which you can reduce the harms? And so you can assist that person that's having difficulty achieving that change by talking about harm minimisation. And some of the suggestions are, look, why don't you set some rules that you're only going to use when you come home instead of first thing in the morning, or you're going to use after lunch or after dinner, or whatever the case may be for that person. You look at their pattern and negotiate, you know, where they can set some boundaries. And then for people who smoke a lot and don't really want to feel withdrawal, you would suggest that they cut down by a third a week, right? For example, if they're smoking, say, 30 a day, they should cut down by 10, so down to 20 for 1 week, and then another third for another week. That reduces the amount they smoke while minimising withdrawal, if at all. So depending on how much they smoke, that is the suggestion, is that they reduce by a third per week and maintain that for a week and then reconsider cutting down by another third. They may want to cut down the number of days in which they smoke, depending on how much they smoke and how often they smoke is another suggestion. The other thing is to educate people that they don't get a higher high by holding on to the smoke. As a matter of fact, that is more harmful than benefits that they're getting in terms of the high. So do not hold on to the smoke. Smoke it as though you are having a cigarette. Take 4 small puffs rather than take 1 deep puff and hold on to it. Suggest that people may go from joints rather than bongs that are much worse for you, which I won't go into right now, but for very obvious reasons. Or I may have actually perhaps discussed it last week. Now, if they are going to reduce, then you need to have a conversation around tobacco and how much that's reduced by, because the withdrawal from tobacco is more extreme and comes on a lot in less time than the withdrawal from cannabis. So tobacco patches may need to be had or bought if they are going to reduce the number that they smoke, and in so doing reducing the tobacco. So that's a discussion that you might want to have with them. Don't share bongs or joints, and use a diet joint containing less cannabis, or even start off with less and less tobacco, weaning yourself off the tobacco, and then weaning yourself off the cannabis. So they are some harm minimisation suggestions that you may want to discuss with your client if they really don't wish to stop smoking but reduce the harms. So give them some information, self-help books, fact sheets, the handbook that goes with the ACCU called What's the Deal, Cannabis Facts for Young People, whatever you deem to be, you know, appropriate for that particular person. There is so many resources that we have that you can give them. That Clear Your Vision is a self-help book. The fact sheets are really good eye-openers. Reduce Your Use is a web-based intervention. There's, of course, our telephone, 4 sessions over the telephone that people can get counselling anonymously, 4 sessions with Lifeline. So there are many things that you might suggest that people do if they don't want to come back and see you, and in the future they want to try and do something by themselves. There's, you know, a range of things that they could do. So if they're not sure, look, I'm not sure right now. I don't know how I feel. It's kind of like a bit sudden. I don't know if that's the answer. So, as I said, suggest the options, ask permission to go through those options. Would it be helpful to talk about some of the things you might consider? As we said, no change, stopping, reduction, and so on. And are any of these interesting for you? Is there anything else that I can kind of tell you that might, you know, help you decide whether you want to have a go at it or not go at it? Can I ring you in a week and see how you're feeling? Would you like to take anything else with you just to kind of help you decide whether you want to stab at it or not? You might actually even want to go back to the times where they have quit in the past and what motivated them to do that. You might want to revisit that depending on, you know, the way the conversation goes. Now, if someone goes, yeah, look, I had no idea. I mean, this is just crazy, you know, how much I smoke. You go, oh, okay, so you want to maybe reduce or stop, or what's the story? Well, yeah, you know, I don't know. I really think this is, yeah, I'd like to have a go at it. All right, so how do you know you're smoking too much is the question. You're not telling them that it's a problem. You're not making any judgment. You go, okay, so you think you're smoking too much. So why is that? It helps them think through clearly. It clearly articulates their reasons that they want to consider for reducing their cannabis use. So it makes explicit key motivators for change. So the question about, you know, how do you know that you're smoking too much helps them recognise and focus on their signs of overuse as they see them. So get specific descriptions of those particular signs. Explore each one of them and reflect that back. It really sends a message home to them, and they're providing you with all that information. So then kind of provide them with a summary of overuse and ask them, you know, is that a kind of accurate description, do you think, of what you kind of said? And ask whether they have any plans to change. And if so, how might they go about doing that? It's very important at this point to support self-efficacy, right? You need to find something in their history that they've been able to look at or overcome or persevere through or just cope with as a suggestion that they have some positive characteristics that they might use in the event that they want to try and cut down on their cannabis or even stop. So I don't know, if they've given up cigarettes in the past or been hospitalised or something. I mean, you say, look, you managed to cope with that, which is just amazing. A lot of people would find that really, really difficult. But, you know, you've shown that you can make some tough changes. I think that, you know, you might be able to at least have a crack at changing your cannabis smoking as well if you wanted to. So what do you think about that? So that's just kind of a very, you know, overview of what you might, the conversation that you might want to have. So there you go. There it is there. If yes, get specific descriptions, provide a summary of overuse, ask if that's accurate, etc., etc. So I'll let you read that, which I have just discussed. Oh, oh, what happened? No, I need to go back to my slideshow. There I am. I pressed the wrong thing. So if the person is receptive to assistance, you need to alleviate their fears. You know, everyone hates the discomfort. They're scared about change. None of us like change. And so you need to clarify what their concerns are, give them more information and feedback. Give them choices about the way to do it. As we said, every second day for a while and so on. And give them information or referrals if they don't want to come back and see you. In the event that you've had this discussion, where do we go from here? Yeah, look, I'd really want to have a stab at it. And as I said to you, we were unbelievably surprised when people came back from the assessment to the feedback session, having already stopped, and some of those went on to the third session where they wanted some strategies and some help for reducing. So this is why we're running these particular workshops on the ACCU. So in the event that, yes, I want to have a stab at it, you go on to offering the CBT skills session, and you continue with a CBT skills strategy booklet that looks like that. That's the black one. So just to kind of put some perspective on it in terms of the first session, which is the feedback. The first session, which is the assessment. People come to the assessment. Not everybody is going to come back to the feedback, but a lot of people will. And they're not, of those people, maybe half will go on to the strategies session. So that is why, you know, you would order strategies workbook, or you wouldn't order as many strategies workbook as you would the green slimline one for the feedback form. So that is the strategy workbook that you will give. Eric, this is the book I'd like you to have. You and I will go through this. Now, you can decide with your clients whether you want to have one session, one further session, or two further sessions, or however many you want to go through the book. And you can order these books, or I'm not sure if you can download them. But anyway, obviously, you can order them. Now, what it contains is it outlines the intervention. Again, you review cannabis use and dependence, the reasons for smoking, why smoke, why change, look at some goals. You may want to quit or cut down. What's it going to be? When are we going to do this? So you look at a change date. And you talk about increasing enjoyable activities, because when you take away smoking cannabis, then you're left with, you know, a whole heap of time that you need to replace with something. And so you need to revisit the things that you used to do before you started smoking, and perhaps rejoin a group or a football club, or I don't know, what, fishing, whatever it happens to be. And part of the, within the book, one of the components is looking at high-risk situations that you need to identify they need to identify with your help, because you need to develop some strategies related to those high-risk situations, as it says there. So you need to develop some of those strategies. You talk about withdrawal and how to alleviate withdrawal, and part of that is looking at the 4 Ds, which it talks about in the book. You describe what they are. You give some examples about how to distract oneself, and you need to check that that is something that they would do. This distraction needs to be something that they're able or capable of doing. Or delay, definitely say, look, if you're just climbing up the wall, just see if you can just allow that urge to pass. You may want to discuss urge surfing with them. Tell them that it only lasts generally 30 minutes, and what can they do during that 30 minutes, and talk about the wave, how it crests and then falls. Talk about decatastrophizing. It's not the worst thing that's ever happened. Compare that to whatever else they've experienced. Anyway, in terms of going through the 4 Ds, you might want to talk about rationalizations. describe to them and ask them, their experiences of rationalizing, well, it's not a good time, or it's never a good time, or how they're, working through what they're doing. And so self-rewards, the grief reaction, that's experienced by people who give up smoking. So very similar, it occurs when people give up cannabis. They feel that there's a loss. They feel that something's gone, and so you need to prepare them for that and talk them through how you're going to cope with that. Obviously not in the one session, but this I'm just saying that these are the components of that book, which I'll just very quickly gloss over in a sec. But it contains these things: self-reward, and then you talk, very important, self-reward. We normally maintain a change in our behaviour if it's rewarding, if we actually feel that there's a payoff. We don't normally engage in behaviour that doesn't give us some payoff, some, whatever payoff that may be. It's a bit like monkeys, really. So it's important to talk about self-rewards and maybe make some suggestions about how they're going to reward themselves for not smoking. Because, it's definitely a trap that people choose smoking as a reward. So we need to even talk about money. What could you do with the $50 extra a week, or $25 extra a week, or what are some things that you'd like to? And it should be immediate. It should be something that's tangible and something that they can kind of feel straight away. And then you talk about the difference between a lapse and a relapse and so on, and kind of summarize and wrap up. So this is what the book looks like. If any of you have already got it, you know what it looks like. But for those of you who don't, it looks like that. And it was really designed with young people in mind, with all that smoke in the back. And I remember at one of the workshops someone said, well, doesn't that smoke make someone feel like a smoke when they see it? And I guess in some cases it may. But I haven't forgotten that, actually. So I don't know. I guess you need to check with your client whether that evokes a craving for cannabis. But anyway, so there you go. That's number one, looking at dependence and so on. And then two, you're looking at triggers, because you're trying to develop some strategies for those high-risk situations. Then we look at the pros and the cons. And then we look at why change, what do you hope to get out of that? And again, you've kind of touched on that, but you're reviewing it again, and you need to tell them that that's what you're reviewing, just to make sure that you're all on the same page. And as I said, it's very, very important that you write down a list of enjoyable activities that they're going to engage in, and you really need to kind of explore that. So what are they? And you say you want to go and, I don't know, just off the top of my head, you like 10-pin bowling. Well, is there a bowling club near you? How much does it cost? When are they open? Who would you go with? So get as much detail as you can, which then encourages them to go down there and make some inquiries. Where were we? Dealing with high-risk situations. Again, they need to have a plan on how to do this. Then the next section is urges to smoke, the four Ds, as we said: distract, delay, rationalizing, i.e. keep cravings in perspective, de-stress, go back to the negatives as to why you're doing this, and so on. So that's there. And then we talk about withdrawals and how to minimize the withdrawal symptoms. So you revisit that, and then the future. So let's look at those goals that you wanted. And let's revisit that, and let's see how long it might take for you to get these things if you were to have a go at it. And as I said, this can be discussed in one session, or 2 sessions, or 3 sessions with that client. And then the last pages are about doing it, and when they're going to do it, write down that change date. Beware of rationalizations there again. Common ones include, as a special occasion, maybe I should just smoke once. I've had a really hard week, and so on. So just make people aware that your mind does play tricks on you when you're feeling a bit vulnerable, and it will take 2 or 3 weeks before this becomes a new habit. And as we said, stopping smoking can be like losing a best friend. So that's what that's about. And it's important for them to self-monitor how they're feeling, whether they're smoking, how much they've reduced, depending on what the target is. And so the self-monitor sheet is something that you need to guide somebody through in terms of how to use it and what to write down in there. So you should go through that with them, perhaps even photocopy a few more pages, because it's only got, as you can see, only 1 page there. So you might, or they can draw it up on a piece of paper for themselves if they wanted to. And then, of course, we talk about relapse prevention, and whatever you do, you need to send the message across very strongly that a lapse or a relapse is not failure. It is simply practice in trying to change. And in terms of quoting, I don't know, some anecdotal thing from somewhere, I can't remember where I heard it, but it goes something like 30% of people change and maintain that change, 30% of people continue to try and try and try, but I think that's a good thing, and 30% of people don't even try. And so we need to keep trying, and that's the message. Even if you lapse, it's practice for the end game, which is either to reduce or to stop. And then, of course, there's the summary and so on. So now I've basically walked you through the ACCU. I've given you the evidence on which it was based. We've talked through the assessment session. Again, what's very important is that this is an invitation. This is not something that's, and again, you play devil's advocate. Look, I'm not sure, whether cannabis is an issue for you or it's related to whatever it is they're seeing you about. But, would it be okay if we could explore this a bit more so that we can either rule it out or maybe look at it a bit more closely? So it is an invitation. And in so doing, you actually unearth some of the issues that they may not have thought about, because most people just do things without, particularly smoking cannabis. You just do it as a habit. You don't think about it and so on. So this is an opportunity to sit down with you for an hour and really explore it like they've never done that before. So that's the assessment. And then you say, look, I don't know what all this means, to be honest, but thank you for answering all these questions. I just need to look at it, and would it be okay for you to come back next week or tomorrow or whenever for the feedback session? And you go through the feedback in a very, very kind of MI kind of way, because you are trying to increase awareness and listen for change talk. And at the end of it, you go, okay, so where do we go from here? What would you like to do? And the answers are either going to be yes, no, don't know, in which case you'll explore each one of those. And for those who say, yeah, look, I want to have a go at it, you then invite them back to do the CBT session with you and use the strategies book. So that's basically it in a nutshell. I'm more than happy to field any questions if I've missed something out or not been clear. This is just a very funny way to deliver workshops, but I think I'm getting the hang of it. And the take-home message really for us is a thorough assessment is absolutely essential. Screen, assess, give feedback and educate. They're the most important things that you can do. Engage into treatment, and the best ways to engage into treatment is to use MI. So that's strongly suggested. And as I said last week, if you just pick up the book and leaf through it and just kind of read a couple of pages, have a go at it, dip in and out of it, I'm pretty sure that, within a very short period of time, you'll kind of, it'll be second nature to you. So that would be the suggestion. And in reality, do not despair if people are not totally abstinent. Just try to encourage them, and I think just just the fact that you're there and they're talking to you, I think, in and of itself is a wonderful thing to do. So, as I said, there's the take-home message. Your input as a clinician is to educate people, is to encourage them to have a go, to be supportive of them, and to empower them. They need to feel that they're in control, and I guess that's what we do as clinicians, is those things. They need to make an effort. I mean, they need to do something. It's not just going to happen magically. And they need, I guess, to be supported and rewarded by making that effort. And it for the outcome to be either a reduction or not, or stopping altogether, three things need to be operating. Clinical skills, which you have, a motivated client, who's willing to put in place the things that you're suggesting with your help, and a sound validated treatment, which is the one that I have just been describing to you over the last 4 webinars. So having said all of that, happy to answer any questions in the 2 or 3 minutes that we have left. This will be available on our website. I'm not sure when, but please stay posted. Just a few more teething problems. I think that's really all I have to say. Are there any questions, Dion, that I can answer while I'm here?
Thank you very much, Etty. I hope everyone's enjoyed the webinar series so far. All the questions that I have, Etty, are relating to what resources we have and where they can find them, and also the slides from today. And I guess the answer to that is that all of the resources that we have are on our website. We are having a few teething problems because we've just developed a new website. So if there is something that you're after that you can't find, please email myself, and I'll put my email at the bottom of the screen there. And apart from that, I think it's important to let everyone know that we'll send out the slides of all 4 webinars, and we're hoping to get the webinars on our website by the early December, mid-December. If for some reason we can't because of some of the teething problems we're having, it'll be early January, but they will be posted online. Do people have our emails just in case they need to email us? Yes, my email's at the bottom of that page there. But they may not be able to see that page, is what I'm saying. Right. I will be sending everyone an email, so they'll receive my email later. Okay, I just want to finish off by saying how much I appreciate everyone's time for making the time to listen to that, and I really sincerely hope that it's useful in trying to reduce the harms that people experience as a result of smoking cannabis. I guess that's why we're here. Again, really appreciate your input, really appreciate you listening. So maybe next year we'll do some more webinars, and I hope that you log on then. Okay, thanks everybody.